Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video. In this one, I just want to quickly go over what I like to recommend as equipment for my starter loadouts in the beginning, before you have level 2 traders or the flea market unlocked to really start to trick out your weapons and get better armor. Currently, there's some pretty decent basic gear that you can grab right from the level 1 traders, and most of what I'm going to recommend in this video is stuff that's available to simply buy outright, or do simple barter trades for stuff that you're definitely going to find out in the raid if you're paying attention. I'm not going to talk too much about the starter gear that you begin with on your account, because it's really up to you whether you want to go all in with the starter gear in your class 4 armor, or if you want to wait it out until you can get better ammo for the RPK or the MDR to run in those loadouts. To start out, we'll stick with my bread and butter and look at a few very simple weapon builds that I use quite a bit from level 1 to 15 while questing and waiting to upgrade my traders, and then I'll briefly talk about the armor selection at level 1 and some other equipment as well. First up, I want to talk a bit about the ADAR, the M4's little brother, and a really solid choice basically throughout the game as long as you're running appropriate ammo and mods. The ADAR is semi-auto, but the lowish recoil compared to other rifles, good muzzle velocity, and the convenience of being able to easily add a sight makes this a favorite of mine at lower levels. You can buy this straight up from Skier, but it's also an extremely common rifle to find on AI scavs, or to spawn with as a player scav, and I've got a little trick to show you that will allow you to fully repair any scav ADAR to 100 durability for only about 7,000 rubles. First, get yourself a low durability ADAR from a scav, and then all you need to do is head over to Skier level 1 and buy the ADAR lower receiver. Now just swap all the parts over from the scav ADAR and sell the rest to fence, and you have a fully repaired rifle ready to roll out into the next raid. You can do this with many other rifles later on at higher trader levels as well, but sadly this is one of the only ones that you can easily repair at level 1. After repairing the ADAR, I then go and grab the MK12 low profile gas block from Mechanic to replace the front sight, and then I generally just add the Cobra reflex sight from Jaeger for a simple upgrade. If your ADAR is missing the muzzle device, you can also just buy the A1 muzzle from Peacekeeper as well. If you can get your hands on an emergency water ration, which you should be able to pretty easily since they spawn anywhere that food can spawn, you can do a simple trade at Peacekeeper level 1 to get this Daniel defense rail to add other attachments as well. The only grip really worth using at level 1 is the RK6 from Skier, so I like to add that for some extra stats, but mostly I like to do this to get a flashlight onto the ADAR, which can be really helpful. You'll need to use the army flashlight and the 25mm mount ring from either Skier or Peacekeeper for this at level 1, but it still really helps in dark areas or to blind opponents at close range, and I always love having a flashlight. All around with the new recoil system, the ADAR seems like a strong contender for early wipe, especially with M855 being able to punch through class 3 armor now. Next up, we have the classic early wipe AK build, which I've covered a few times before, so I'm going to be quick about this. This build can be transferred to pretty much any AK except the AKS-74U, and it basically just allows you to upgrade the base stats slightly and attach a sight and a flashlight or grip if you want one. First, I remove the gas block and handguard, and then buy the Ultimac M1B rail from Skier, which replaces the handguard for a bit of a recoil upgrade. Next, I add the Bastion dust cover for a sight mount, which also improves the recoil, and then I add the Cobra reflex sight or whatever sight you prefer or find out in the raid. This extremely simple setup can be transferred to any AK that you find out in the raid as well, so even though this one is shown on a Vepr KM bot from Skier, you can do this on an AK-74 or AKM that you find from scavs or in crates. An alternate build for this one, if you want to get a flashlight and a grip, would be to leave the gas block on the rifle and then get the AK-100 series handguard from Proper, which has 2 rails for attachments. Next, you can add the same flashlight and 25mm ring from the ADAR build and the same Zenit RK6 foregrip, and you end up with basically the same build with a couple more ergonomics points and a flashlight for blinding people. One final alteration to this build is that if your AK has a dovetail mount, you can skip the dust cover and just buy the dovetail Cobra from Proper and save a little bit of rubles. The last weapon that I always swear by at the start of the wipe is the ever trusty PP19, which is a starter weapon for bears, so there's going to be a lot of these things floating around the PvP loot pool at the start of the wipe. With this thing, you can basically copy and paste the exact same build from the AK, but you'll need the dovetail Cobra sight from Proper. My standard PP19 loadout is the Cobra sight plus the AK-100 handguard with the flashlight and 25mm ring. I skipped the foregrip because you don't really gain much from it, but you can add it if you want and it doesn't cost too much. With this build, you have some of the most controllable full auto fire out of any setup in the early game, and with the cheap PST GZH ammo, you can spray all you want for low cost, and this thing is a beast in CQB early in the wipe. To finish off the video, I want to quickly go over the armor and basic equipment that I generally run in the early game, at least when it's available from traders and not completely sold out, such as the case with the 6B5 armored rig from Ragman level 1. This rig is technically the best available at level 1, and if you can get it, it's really quite good at making you very resistant to any pistol rounds, shotgun shells, and even some basic rifle rounds for at least a few shots. Unfortunately though, because everyone is trying to buy this right now all at the same time, it's not available most of the time, but if you're lucky, you can snipe one from Ragman. The next best thing to this 6B5 rig is the 6B23 Flora armor, which you can trade from Proper in exchange for one propane tank, which is surprisingly common to find among industrial loot and in houses, tool sheds, and places like that. This armor is basically just as good as the 6B5 rig in the early game, so I always try and grab propane tanks to do this trade. And then you have a fairly good armor which pairs nicely with the bank robber or the CSA rig from Ragman. Finally, we have the tried, tested, and true P.A.K.A. armor, which I found a bit of a new respect for during this wipe if I'm being honest. It's not going to save you from any bullets with any real stopping power, but the P.A.K.A. can take a surprising amount of punishment from shotguns and low power rounds used by the Keter, PPSH, PM pistol, and other weapons commonly used by scavs. I use the P.A.K.A. as a starter armor, and basically I'm always on the lookout for something to replace it with in raid so I can get it back through insurance and do the whole thing again. Outside of these choices, in the early game, your only other real option is to find something on a scav or in a crate. So if you see any armor class 3 and above out there in the raid, equip that straight away, and if you have space, hoard up some armors from scav kills to use in future raids. For helmets in the early game, you have the classic SSH steel helmet and the 6B47 as two pretty solid options, and they can be bought from Ragman or Proper. I generally skip these helmets in the early wipe and wait till I have a little bit more money and some better armor to pair with them, but that's really up to you, and you can trade for the 6B47 helmet from Ragman for just a couple of Clin wipers. For Comtacs, I use either the GSSH or the M32s from Skier. They're both pretty good and do kind of the same thing, and it's really up to you which one you think sounds better. The final note on equipment here is pretty simple and shouldn't really be a big revelation to most players, but in the last patch we got the ability to buy better backpacks from level 1, so you don't need to suffer through the pains of using the sling bag or army backpack anymore. At Ragman level 1 you can buy the Berkut backpack and the MBSS bag for rubles, and these are all you really need in the early game. If you're tactical about it and always insure your backpacks and then swap them out with others you find in the raid for insurance fraud, you can quickly build up an almost infinite insurance loop of Berkut bags, and that little bit of extra space will equal out to a lot of extra value if you fill this thing every raid. When it comes to other equipment like meds and grenades, a lot of that is going to come down to scavenging for supplies before you unlock higher level traders. But my general advice is to always bring one Esmarch tourniquet and one bandage in your pockets, and then keep your other meds like a splint, painkillers, and a med kit in your container until you find something more valuable and then swap them out. This way you have the dangerous bleeds covered with an easy hotkey, and you keep your hard to replace items like aluminum splints or IFAKs safe in case you get spawn trapped or something like that. Other than that, make sure to try and unlock the car medkit from Therapist early if possible, though I hear gas analyzers are a real pain to find right now, and just be sure to loot med crates to get a good stockpile of meds for your early runs. That pretty much covers this basic look at what I'm running in the early game, which I don't claim to be the best gear ever, but they are safe recommendations that any player can acquire without needing level 2 traders or the flea market. I'll be taking a look at level 2 traders as soon as I unlock them all, so stay tuned to the channel if you're interested in that, because weapon modding is looking to be a whole new beast in this patch. In any case, I hope you find this helpful, and let me know what you've been running in the early game for the 12.12 patch down in the comments. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream, Discord server, and Patreon page down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.